course, I'm speaking in English with you for a while, so please give a warm welcome for Michael Benich.
Thank you, everyone. I see the crypto talk cleared everybody out good enough, so people get that a lot. But today, basically, I'm going to talk about some of the dumbest bugs that I've ever found that have to do with smart contracts, right? Everyone assumes that smart contracts, they're better, they're the coolest thing, they're complicated, where really there's a lot of surface for a lot of really silly mistakes to happen. And so that's what this talk is about today. So about me a little bit, I actually work in crypto. I do work for a crypto company, but I'm here today on my own accord. This is my own research, so not officially affiliated with a company or anything like that. In my day job, I do red team operations, also pen testing, and I'm involved in bug bounty stuff. Fun fact about me, I came here from Cleveland, Ohio. We used to have B-Sides Cleveland, which was a fun conference, but we don't anymore. And then DerbyCon was my second favorite conference. We don't have that anymore, but this is my first Hackfest, and it's the next closest one to where I live. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And so anytime I'm talking about something that involves new technology or things that maybe people aren't familiar with, I think it's important to have some definitions so we're all on the same page. So one of the first things I want to define is, what is a DEX? A DEX, or so you can see it's spelled D-E-X, is just basically a decentralized exchange, right? It's a very popular thing in crypto because you would want to use a DEX if you don't want to use one of the big exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken or things like that. Maybe they have a coin that you want to have, but they don't offer it, right? So you use something called a DEX to go ahead and get that done, right? And so this is the UI of a DEX, and that's basically how it works, right? You type in the coin you want and maybe the contract address, and then what you want to get out of it, and then you click a button, and you'll connect to your wallet. And so for most people in crypto, they use a wallet called MetaMask, right? It's a browser wallet, it's a browser extension, pretty straightforward. But you can see this is what the UX is like, where you get prompted with some basic info, such as the contract address, how much the gas fee costs, which is the transaction fee, essentially, and then the total that you'll pay in order to perform that swap. So pretty straightforward, right? A DEX is something that is used to trade one crypto for another. Well, a little bit more about those. A lot of DEXs are also DAOs. I know I said, there's a lot of terminology here, but a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. Well, what the hell does that mean, right? Well, what that actually means is that there's no real owner. It's almost kind of like an experimental sort of democracy of an organization. So essentially how it works is you get representation to propose and vote on different things based on how many of these tokens that you have. So for example, sushi here linked at the bottom is a DAO, right? If you have 100 sushi, you have a certain proportion of voting power, but if you have 1,000 sushi, you have proportionally more power. Kind of like in the US, you have the Electoral College and states and various things like that, right? So kind of an interesting thing, but one of the things about DAOs is that they develop publicly on GitHub, which makes it a really interesting place to go searching for bugs, right? It's out there in the public, people are coding in public, so it's a good place for us to look for bugs. So if you were to start making a DEX, right, or you wanted to create a DAO or something like that, you would use, in general, part of the dApp stack. And by dApp, I mean a decentralized application, right? So not like a regular application. It's usually something that connects to your Web3 wallet, stuff like that. So in order to do that, you might be using a framework. And the most commonly popular one is called Next.js, right? It makes it easy to connect with things like MetaMask so that people can take that and abstract that away, and they can concentrate on building other things, and it's a simple 1 or 2 lines to integrate all those prompts like we talked about. So the Next.js team, they also have a tool that they've developed called Versal. And so it's a cloud deployment system that comes from the team. It's the same team working on those, just a different product. But the best way to understand that is it's kind of like GitHub pages, right? If you've ever made an edit, if anybody has a GitHub page, what you do is you edit the markdown, and then it will automatically generate your github.io page. Well, it's the same type of thing, except a little bit more, right? It's on steroids. So, for example, some of the things that Versal can do is every time you have a branch, you'll get a new deployment site. Every time you make a pull request, you'll get a new site. So it's pretty useful, especially if you're a DAO developing out there in public, right? You want everybody to see what you're working on. So Versal, I looked into this a little bit. It's pretty interesting, right? So this is what it looks like. You add this to your repository, and there's a little bot that will comment basically every time you make a pull request. And you can see that, OK, there's a preview, and you can click on that, and you'll get a URL for it. So you'll get a URL for your project, you'll get a URL for your branch, and you'll get a URL for your pull request, which is pretty useful, right? So there's lots of things that are there, they're out there on the internet, and then they're accessible, right? So you get this little markdown site, or however you want to build it, that is accessible by anyone. And so that's the gist of how that works, right? Just edit the code, it'll automatically deploy it for you. Where could that go wrong? Well, I actually learned about Versal not by going the developer route. I like to read the news. And so, of course, everything that happens in crypto, when there's a huge hack or scam or things like that, it's really interesting and gets that hacker brain in me going. So the first I learned about Versal was actually in this headline where $320,000 were drained from one of these dexes because of a bug in Versal. And I was like, that's really interesting. And, you know, $320,000 is still a lot of money, right? I went to the inflation talk in the Bitcoin Village today, but, you know, maybe the 320,000 might not be that much in the future. I don't know. Depends how hyperinflation does. But right now, it's a lot of money, right? So it was kind of interesting that they put out this press release because I also saw on Twitter, you know, the thing with DAOs is maybe it's not the most professional operation sometimes. And so this project that got hacked, before they put out this press release, they said it's so easy to steal from Versal. And so Versal had to respond and said, hey, it's not possible to steal domains via our service. OK, well, that should ignite the hacker brain in all of us. It's not possible to steal domains. Challenge accepted, right? So that's how I started finding out about this and looking into this. So now I was trying to think, how could they get away with $320,000, right? That's a very expensive bug. They didn't compromise keys. They didn't get domain admin, right? They didn't steal anything that you would think would be there. So how did they actually make off with $320,000? Well, as an attacker, their plan would be to take over the domain, right? So they own the domain. They could host whatever they want on the domain. And once they take over that domain, they can replace any contract address with the attacker, right? Everything works normal for the user, and it's kind of like phishing, where it looks the same, the login form feels the same, except now it's even better because when they go to approve that transaction in MetaMask, that little contract at the top, most people aren't going to read it, right? It's not a very good UX. People aren't paying attention. There's so much extraneous info in here. And so basically what they did is they just replaced the contract that was supposed to swap with a contract that allowed them to steal those funds, right? So people think they're swapping, and it turns out they're giving permissions to spend their whole wallet to this attacker. And so that's a pretty interesting scenario. And so I wanted to see, OK, is this possible in any other situation? Are there other ways to do this? And how widespread is this type of issue? So I started digging into it. The best way to dig into it, I love open source tools because you can play with it yourself, right? So I created a repo, I messed around with it, I saw it generated a URL for me, and I decided what happens if I delete a branch or change the name of it or do something different, right? That's something that happens in open source a lot. You work through it, it changes hands, the branch is no longer valid. Whatever the reason may be, you rename it for certain reasons. Well, when you delete that branch in Versal or pull request or whatever that is, you get this 404 page, right? And it says deployment not found. And so that got me to be thinking, all right, so if it's deleted and it's not found, that's fine. But putting on that attacker cap, right, maybe I can take that over with a different account since that URL is now available for me to claim. That wouldn't be possible, right? They would have some sort of like text record or verification token or something that you'd have to do to be able to claim that domain, right? So I made a separate account. I got a burner GitHub account, made a burner Versal account, and I put my domain in there from the branch that I had deleted. And guess what? Boom. I was able to take it over and post whatever I wanted on that branch, right, on that domain, right? I have a site that is linked all over my other GitHub account, right? It might be in my documentation, it might be on Twitter, it might have, other elements sort of connected to this build that now I, as the attacker, control. So super interesting, and I wanted to see, okay, are there any actually programs in the wild that maybe have this state right now? And so I started looking, as someone who does ethical bug bounty things, I started looking at programs that had bug bounty programs. And so I started looking at a program called Yearn. And Yearn is another dApp, but basically I crawled through GitHub and I tried to see, are they using Versal? Do they have any links to Versal in anything that they have? And so they had one particular repository that you can see in their deployments history on GitHub. They have production and preview and things like that. And so I looked to see where there were errors, right? You can see it says pending or maybe failed or something like that. Like maybe that would be a reason to delete that branch if it fails, right? Well, it turns out that if you visit that URL, you get the 404 page that we're expecting. And so what does that mean? That means I can take that over, I can host whatever content I want, and now I, as an attacker, imagine if I did that same Evo DeFi hack where I replace contract addresses, maybe I deliver malware, right? There's all kinds of interesting things that I can do with it to anyone who might be actually trying to see the latest deployment or maybe a previous deployment. So I started to look for that everywhere, right? It was pretty interesting to see, okay, how widespread is this? Is this just a fluke? And will people actually go through the deployments and click on that? Well, it turns out there are more than one places other than just those initial deployments. So the main sites for a lot of these repos use Versal to deploy documentation. So on the official DAO site for Yearn, they were linking to this thing called Yearn Hub, which is basically a documentation site. Well, guess what? When I visited that site, I got the 404 message of death, right? So what does that mean as an attacker? That means I could take advantage of the official docs telling you where to go and what to do and post whatever I want linked from official sources. I think that's pretty dangerous, right? And I feel like now is time to report this to the company here. Well, I reported it through ImmuneFi, which is a Web3 bug bounty platform. Sorry if you're from ImmuneFi, but not applicable because they only accept smart contract bugs. Well, at the end of the day, I still had these domains in my account, and I needed to get them back. And so I ended up having to do my own research because, these domains are linked on Twitter. They're linked in documents. They're linked in other resources, right? And I control all the power. So, imagine if we promoted this tweet or something like that, right? That would be a really successful message because you teach people to check the domain, check the account, make sure it's not fake followers. Well, guess what? This is 100% real. It's valid. It's from someone with a verified check mark, but I control all the content, right? So that's a recipe for disaster, especially when you're dealing with crypto. So I really wanted this to get back to the right team. So I had to find people on Keybase, and they did say, thank you, I appreciate it. We'll give you a $500 bonus for the disclosure, which was nice, right? I appreciate that. And of course, that inspired me to look even more. So another common DEX is called SushiSwap. SushiSwap is like one of the big two, right? It's one of the biggest DEXs out there. And so I also did the same search for Versal domains to find anything that might have been hard-coded or transferred or changed or any particular references. Well, that domain that you're looking at, the SushiSwap interface canary, I got the 404 page. And this time, it was a little bit different because there were hard-coded references to things like logos, assets, resources that now I, as an attacker, control on this interesting project, right? So there's a lot of bad things they can do with that, but I'm not going to stop there, right? Last time it was out of scope, so I'm going to try even harder. So what I did is I found that at some point in time, SushiSwap bought a very valuable domain, sushi.com, right? Well, their old domain was sushiswap.com. .fi. And so there was a period of time in which they transferred all of their SushiSwap.fi assets over to the new domain, and at some point in time, something broke, something transferred, someone forgot to remove it from Versal, so it's still pointing towards Versal, which means that I can take it over. The whole domain instead of just these production URLs, right? The name servers were still pointing to Versal. You can see that on the right-hand side. So let's see what we can do with that, right? This is going to be pretty valuable. So when I went to add it to my Versal account, they had two ways that you could add it to your account. One, you could add an A record, and I had to hope that they had the correct A record in there. Well, that didn't work. However, the easy way, and the non-recommended way, I might add, is to set up the name servers. Well, guess what? They were already set. There's no verification associated with that, right? They already exist. I can just add it to my account, no text record, nothing. Now I own the domain, the entire base domain, instead of a subdomain or a deploy domain, right? I own the whole thing. And not only do I own the whole thing, I own any subdomains that were associated with it, right? I can set records. I can set TXT records now. I can set MX records, right? There's a whole bunch of things that I found through DNS Dumpster and Amass that, were broken links. Now I control them. So I really wanted to make sure I maximize my dollar on this one, right? I wanted to get more than $500. So I thought, okay, I'm going to show impact because I have the whole domain now. This is a great opportunity to show what an attacker could really do. To show, hey, maybe you might not lose $320,000, but this could be pretty bad if someone did this. So what I did is I actually did add an MX record, right? I set up a forwarding service with Improv MX just to show them that, hey, if you do password resets or, Slack confirmation codes, for example, now I can receive those things and potentially log into those resources. So things like Slack, things like project management tools, right? And I also made a really nice POC. I thought it was nice, right? Where I can show them that I used the real open source DEX, and then I added my own little window alert type of thing, just to let people know if you are looking at it, it's fake, don't use it. I could have replaced anything here, but hopefully it was impactful enough that I thought maybe someone would say something and say, hey, this guy deserves a bounty. Well, I also, as a little point of interest here, SBF, you may have heard of Sam Bankman-Fried. He's in the news everywhere right now. He's going through trial from all that fraud, supposedly alleged fraud, I guess. But at one point in time, Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy, his official account, tweeted out that domain, right? He has millions of followers. That's a domain that I control now, right? I can post whatever I want. So imagine if I wanted to really hose people, right? I mean, there's a lot that I can do, let's just say, right? So I thought this was pretty good. I have enough impact, and they're really going to love this. Well, I also, just to kind of have this in my back pocket, I also kept track of the traffic just to see, okay, are people actually visiting this site? And yeah, there is. I got hundreds of visits, right? Some bots, of course, but a lot of real people that still had it in their bookmarks or apps that still connected to the old domain for assets and resources. So I thought I had all these things ready to go. I'm golden. And guess what? Not applicable. It's not in scope by the bug bounty platform. That domain was not explicitly in scope. Therefore, I get nothing. However, I still really wanted to make sure that this got to the right people because, like I said, I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of visits on these domains with my message. I don't want to have people assume the wrong thing about what I'm trying to do here. I need these off my hands as fast as I can get. So I went to Discord, right? I'm really stuck finding these different ways of contacting people. So much for a bug bounty platform, I guess. But I define them myself and contact them on Discord and say, hey, I own this domain. What do you want me to put on it to prove that I have it? And this person who is a dev in the Sushi DAO said, wow, we're reporting this to Versal right now. This is an issue. Thanks for reporting this. And he said, okay, I said, hey, bounty, please? Could I please get a token of your appreciation, perhaps? Maybe I can, get a little something, inflation, And I got 100 sushi from him personally. So that's nice, but just so everyone knows, 100 sushi is $50, right? That's really nice. I'm grateful for it. Unfortunately, it was not the amazing 5, 6-figure bounty that I was really hoping for here. Oh, I lost my slides. Sorry. Okay. All right. Great. Wow, that slide must have been really good. So what I want to do is I want to go to turbo mode, right? So I want to maximize my money, right? I want to make sure that I can do everything possible, and I'm going to kick it up to 1.21 gigawatts, right? That's the theme of the conference. Let's go turbo mode. Let's find everything that we possibly can, because that obviously wasn't making me rich. So what I decided, and I realized that a lot of these DeFi apps, a lot of these dApps use .finance or .fi TLDs, right? That's a common thing that they have, right? They're not that creative. There's all kinds of things that happen, right? We saw SushiSwap.fi. Maybe someone else made a XYZ.fi that has the same issue. So how many of these vulnerable domains can we actually identify? Well, it turns out that you can actually ask ICANN for the zone files for some of those TLDs, which is awesome. If you don't do that, it's a really cool way. You can actually find phishing domains like that. It's awesome. You download it, and basically it says, hey, cool, here's every .finance ever right now. And the only thing that you have to say is research purposes. And so that's good enough for me, right? So what I did is I downloaded all those zone files, and I grepped through it looking for Versal name servers and seeing how many we have. And then I used a tool called GoWitness to query each one of those domains. And what am I looking for visually? I'm looking for my favorite 404 error page that indicates that these guys might be taken over. And unfortunately, there were a lot. This happened a year ago, and I had to contact all of these people that had dangling things in order to share this slide here. So there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of people that have this issue. A lot of them were smaller, right? But it's still an issue. So we wanted to make sure that this was fixed before giving this talk. And so in order to fix it, I transferred these domains back to the client, so SushiSwap.fi and all the others went back through the Versal platform. And so Sushi talked on my behalf with the Versal team to ask them, please implement verification for when you have those things. So as of the current state right now, if you try to add these to your accounts, you will get this message that says, hey, this doesn't look like yours. You should have a text record to verify. So that's what we wanted. I feel a lot better about that, and the internet is safe once more. Although it may change, that's not a guarantee that everything is the same. So TLDR, I did not become the richest 30-year-old from doing this. Unfortunately, I made $550, which is enough to cover, food and gas for a week. But dangling DNS is a huge problem, especially open source building in public. It's pretty dangerous when there's so many things changing and you're not keeping track of those. Like I said in my title, it's a smart contract, but it's a really dumb mistake to make, right? It's simple. It's easy to exploit, and it has a high impact if you're doing it wrong. So if I haven't convinced you already to start looking into this stuff, I know a lot of the cybersecurity people don't talk to the crypto people, right? They're in their own worlds, they hate each other, whatever. But maybe this is your sign to go and see what you can do, because there's a lot of interesting attack surface out there, and really anyone could have found these, right? There is nothing technical about this. I signed up for a website and put a URL in there, right? It's not rocket science. However, it really could have been impactful if I got the right domain. So with that, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. If you'd like to talk more about this, you can see me on LinkedIn. I also write on Medium, and I do have these slides with resources, links, so you can start to read about some of these things and some of those tools I glossed over. Just in full disclosure, there were a lot more that I cut from this slide deck for time, but nothing got me further than the $550 I made. So disappointing, but life goes on, and hopefully I encourage you to go out there and see what there is, see what you can do. Even if you're not that technical, this is something anyone could have done and found. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for my first Hackfest. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have more for you if you want something.